Soldano is coming up.
He's the maker of the famous Soldano amps used by people like Eric Clapton. You've heard of him?
I want Jean's jacket and James Dean's car, Eddie's hair and Carl's guitar. Then I'll be rocking. Yeah, then I'll be rocking. I want Ricky's cool, Johnny's cash, the King's mansion, Jimmy's stash. I'll be rocking. Then I'll be rocking. And when I'm on the road, I stay at Morrison's Hotel. If I had Haley Specter, I think I'd wear it well. I want Brian's ear, Domino's fat, the killer's fingers, God's hat. I'll be rocking. Ooh, then I'll be rocking. That's right.
What more do you need? Yeah, what more do you need? I burned a hole through this finger one time with a 400 volts went right through the tip of my
You're going to be able to hear Barry?
Threw me back about 25 feet. Boom! My muscle.
This is a guy who started tinkering around because he didn't like the sounds of amps. Once he got that sound, 30 years ago, I mean, it's been 87, all right? So 30 years right now. He's been doing this, making great amplifiers, and how do I know he's been making great amplifiers? Well, I don't really know that much, but Eric Clapton, George Harrison, Mark Knopfler, all the guys who've come by and played on his amps and walked out the door with them and endorsed his stuff, they knew. Because that's all we ever want to sound like when we're on stage. We just want to sound good. Guys like Mike put all their effort and their energy and 30 years worth of work into making this show for us and for him. Congratulations, sir, on your 30th anniversary. Salud.
Welcome to Northwest Musicmen and Women. Today, Michael Soldano Jr.
That's me.
And Pat Tennis and I are going to sit with him. We'll have a conversation and talk about his life, his experiences, and his incredible contribution to sound. Mike, welcome.
Thank you. Good guy, man.
What does Eric Clapton, Mark Knopfler, the Allman Brothers guitarist Dickie Betts, Howard Leese, Steve Lukather from Toto, and Blondie's guitar player Tommy Kessler, what do they all have in common? Think hard.
Oh, this will be a tough one. Very, really tough. They all play my amps, or have played my amps.
Wow. Well, that's starting our discussion. Here we go.
There you
Tell
go.
us how you met Pat. That is a great story.
Well, that is a great story. I met Pat right here at your house.
Yeah?
When you and Sally invited me and Teresa to your Labor Day weekend party. And I came in, and before I probably even got in here, you came up to me and said, "There's somebody here you've got to meet."
Yeah.
And you took me and introduced me to Pat. And Pat owns one of my Super Lead 60 amplifiers.
California one.
That's right. And you have a miniature horse named after me.
Well, I named him after my hero.
Oh, I am so flattered.
I know, isn't that disgusting? But really, I
think
felt
you're
like
amazing.
such a matchmaker. And how's it working out for you two?
Oh, we're doing well. We're doing well. Settling in.
Settling in. Yeah, I've been so thrilled to meet this guy. You're awesome, pal.
Let's
Well-
talk about your amps.
Okay,
Let's just get right down to
let's
it.
get down to it.
All right, you're a mechanic.
Yes, I am.
Natural ability is a mechanic.
Yeah.
Your drive is cars. I mean, your
Yeah.
passion is, and guitars.
Yeah.
You happen to be a guitar player as well.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, why did you build your old amps? Let's just bring it right out and lay it on the line. Why?
It's the old adage, necessity is the mother of invention.
Get in that band.
That's right.
Necessity.
Yeah, the necessity band. The
Yeah.
Mothers of Invention, they were some other guys. Colleagues and peers late. I started guitar when I was 21. That I didn't have any money to speak of. So the first thing I needed was a really good guitar. And since I couldn't afford to buy a really nice guitar, I figured out how to make one. And so I
Yeah.
started out building a really nice guitar for myself. I had this great guitar, but I was still lacking in tone, and I realized that the weak link in the chain is actually the amp. It's like you can have a really fabulous guitar. Without a good amp, the most fabulous guitar in the world is still not going to sound good because it has to get through the amp. So, I was working in an auto body shop, making $7 an hour.
That's plenty.
Plenty, right?
Plenty
And
of
so I
money.
started saving my money, and I saved, and I saved, and I saved some more, and I finally bought, which at that time was considered to be one of the top guitar amps on the market, and that was the Mesa Boogie Mark IIB, which was a really cool amp. It was very expensive because we're talking 1979, and it was $1,400. That's a lot of dough in
Hand-built,
1979.
aren't they?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
back then they were
Custom hand-built.
totally hand-built. Yeah, it was Randall Smith and his wife building amps in a little cabin in Petaluma,
Wow.
California.
There's a thought.
And And you know, I'd heard Santana play these amps. I'd heard all these guys play them, and the tone was really, you know, I thought pretty fabulous. So I saved up my money. I bought one of these, and I got it, and it was pretty good, but it wasn't exactly what I heard in my head. There was still something I was hearing tonally that this amp wasn't doing, and it had another issue that really bothered me, in that I couldn't get a good separation between the what they called, you know, the rhythm sound and the lead sound. If I got the lead sound kind of shredding the way I wanted it to, the rhythm sound was too dirty, and it kind of, you know, you'd crank up the gain and the bass would start flubbing, you know, and there's just these little things that were really bugging me. And in my head I heard this really cool, like super overdriven, sustainy sound, but it was not quite that. So I decided, well, okay, I'm probably gonna have to build my own.
Being a mechanic,
That's
if
right.
it doesn't run right,
That's right. You
tweak it.
That's right. You tweak it. Good fortune to have a friend of mine, Doug Roberts, who is the son of the late Howard Roberts. And Doug's an electronics genius in the biomedical electric field, all kinds of stuff. The guy's
Geez,
really
that's wrong, isn't it?
super smart.
That's wrong.
It's wrong. It's totally wrong. And he's a great guitar player as well. I got together and we built one amp together. I didn't know anything about electronics at that point, but I was good mechanically. So I designed the chassis, the enclosure, I did all the cabinetry. I laid out the circuit board once he showed me what to do.
Wow.
And we built this amp together, and it sounded pretty good, but we still weren't there yet. So in the evenings, I would just read these old 1940s and 50s tube manuals, electronics books, like
General Electric.
General Electric, RCA tube manual, a bunch of Navy radio manuals, because
That ought to do it.
because the Navy was really pretty efficient in teaching this stuff, because they had to teach guys how to become experts in the field in no time at all.
Yeah.
So anyway, I read all these books, pretty dry reading, but I got an understanding of how vacuum tubes work and how basic, vacuum tube electronics work. And I just started tinkering, and I had this idea what I thought needed to happen. First of all, where the boogie was lacking is that they were cascaded gain structures. In other words, to get the overdrive, they just took the crunch channel, put another tube, and overdrove it through that one, and so they were in series with each other instead of in parallel,
Feeding each other.
And I decided that the clean channel and the overdrive channel should be totally isolated, and they should be parallel to one another and just share a common power amp.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing I did
That
differently.
makes sense, doesn't it?
And then I wanted the way that the bottom end came out to be more chuggy and not so farty like the boogie kind of was. And so I just kept experimenting, and I came up with a circuit that actually worked. I couldn't believe it. I was like, hey! And it was actually somewhat by accident, if the truth be told, in that I designed something on paper. I thought it would really work pretty good, and so I went and built. So I had this. So the way I tested all this stuff is I had this little electronics lab set up in my bedroom, and when I'd get home from work, from the body shop, have my dinner, I'd go in and tinker all night, and then go to bed at some ungodly hour, get up the next morning, go to work, come back and work on this. So I was pretty driven. But anyway, so I had this workbench. I had drawn this circuit out, and I was going to test that night. So I was tinkering around. It was really late at night, and I went ahead and on this piece of plywood. So I had this piece of plywood with all these terminal strips, so I could just like quickly, like a breadboard, just
like a breadboard,
mash up a circuit really fast. Try it. If it didn't work, I could rip it apart and try something else. Well, I put this circuit together. I tried it, and it sounded really good. And so I was like, okay, it's really late. I got to get to bed. I'll finish this tomorrow. So I set it aside. Next evening, I went to work on it, and I was making notes in my little, book about what I was working on. And I realized I'd wired up the thing I had designed wrong. I had soldered, it's like, say, it's a bunch of terminal strips, and so I had accidentally put a resistor, instead of going to here, it went to there, and I put all the right values, but they were improperly put together. But that was the key. That's what gave it the sound.
A mistake, just like all other geniuses.
Yeah, it was
Like
a total
jazz.
like jazz, exactly. And so I came up with this overdrive circuit that really worked. It had this kind of built-in compression thing, and so all I had to do at that point was just I did a little bit of fine tuning. And I built a 50-watt prototype of this thing, still on the piece of plywood, and I took it over to Doug's and Jay's rehearsal place, and we plugged it in, and they went, that sounds pretty good.
Did it have the growl?
It had the growl. It totally had the growl.
Yeah.
So then I was
Right there.
okay, now I have to take this plywood thing and make it into an amp. So I bent up a chassis. I made a little circuit board out of perf board, wired it all up. I needed transformers, so I went to a place in Kirkland called DeYoung Manufacturing. They had an engineer there that was the best guy ever. This guy, John Wozniak, had been a designer back in the 50s for audio stuff. So I come popping in like, hey, I need some transformers, and I'm just like this completely naive, newbie to the whole thing. And John just lit up. He goes, oh my God, this will be great. I get to design an audio transformer. Perfect. He designed me the most perfect 100-watt output transformer. And that transformer is still the transformer we use to this very day in our SLO 100 amplifier. It's one of the signature parts of the sound of that amp. And they're still this point, I'm their only audio customer, and it's proprietary, and they've moved way into doing these really tiny little transformers for aerospace and you know, really super precision aeronautical stuff. But they saved one of their old winding machines just so they could still wind my transformers for me. Martin DeYoung is a saint. He's like amazingly cool guy, and we've become friends over all these years. And he still builds me a small batch whenever I need him of these transformers. Anyway, getting back to the original story. So those transformers went into this amp. I built this 100-watt prototype. Still needed a little bit of fine tuning. And so at that point, though, I was pretty happy with, I had my amp, the amp that was going to be mine, the sound.
So your second amp was your own amp. Your first amp, you stumbled into a Mesa Boogie that cost $1 billion.
$1 billion.
Wow.
Yeah.
We can't relate to you. So what was your guitar?
And so at the time, it was one of the ones I built. So I built myself this little, it was like a scaled down, but a little bit curvier looking Strat style body. In other words, two cutaways and
Well, that'd be nice, yeah.
and kind of smaller scaled body, but full 24 3/4 inch neck, ebony board, maple neck, neck through body. It was really a cool guitar. Something stole it from me in Los Angeles, but
So give it back.
give me my guitar back. I want my white guitar back. I'll even pay for it. I don't care.
Well, hey,
So
just give it back.
So anyway, and it had a couple really hot pickups in it. It had a couple DiMarzio dual sounds, because that was all the rage in that era.
You looked at them, they were putting out.
That's right, they were making sounds. So down to my friend Tommy Martin's rehearsal space, which was down on Airport Way. It was this old dilapidated building that was about ready to cave in. Western Blower Company.
By Rainier Brewery.
A little bit north. Yes, exactly. It was just north of Rainier.
I have a vague memory of being
And the
there.
place was like literally caving in on itself. This place was just like pure chaos all the time. Well, we would drag my amp in there, and Tommy and I would fire that thing up. And every time we'd play that thing, guys would come from all the other rooms like, "What are you guys playing in there?" And they'd be like, "What is that?" You know. So he actually owns Soldano serial number 001. He has the very first amp I ever sold.
Yeah.
And so
Who has two?
Howard Leese.
That's right.
Yeah, Howard
Well,
Leese.
of course you knew that.
And
I just
that
found that
time-
out. I was wondering. where
Yeah.
number
Well,
one
that was actually my personal amp, and
Yeah.
then Howard had to have it. So it's like, well, okay, I can always make another one.
Did they look anything like current production?
Yes, they looked exactly like the SLO 100, the 100-watt super lead overdrive, has never changed since its inception in 1985.
Even your logo?
Logo's the same and everything.
Wow.
I mean, I've used different materials to make the logos. Like the chrome, it looks really cool when you're looking at it, except that you put it up on a stage in a dark room and you can't even see the thing because it reflects the black of the room and it disappears. The amp has remained unchanged for virtually, well, nearly 35 years, I guess it's been.
Yeah, it's a good looking amp.
It's the the airstream of amplifiers.
It kind of is, right?
Mike Soldano is the Bill Gates of amplifiers. That better be on a t-shirt, Mike, okay?
Right? You gotta just, kind of like the Kleenex of amplifiers. It never changes. It's just it's still in January of 1987, I packed up my personal SLO number 2, a 412 cabinet, this crazy red guitar I'd built that was my totally 80s guitar, shoved all that stuff and some clothes and whatnot into the trunk of my 38 Chevy, and I headed to Los Angeles, California.
You drove your 38 down with a...
My hot rodded 38 Chevy had a 350 in it, a 4-speed, about 30 miles around town just to make sure everything worked.
That
and then I
ought to
headed
do
for
it.
LA. Yeah, that was enough. It's like, hey, we went 30 miles, it'll go another 1,200, no problem.
We didn't have cell phones, didn't need them.
Didn't need them. Let's go. And I still don't have a cell phone to this day because I didn't need one then. Why do I need one now?
See, I didn't trust you till I found that out. Now I trust you.
That's funny. Well, I drove the Chevy all the way to LA, and that was actually the only car I had at the time. So that was my daily transportation for like basically a year in LA.
He's moving up the levels, you know. I idolized him now. This is getting pretty good.
Ran a little tiny 780 square foot massage parlor on
Perfect.
Melrose
See,
Avenue.
Now we get down to the real business.
And I went in there solely on the amp thing. And so on April 1st, 1987, I opened Soldano Custom Amplification in Los
Changed
Angeles,
the
California. And then I was fortunate enough to get a review in Guitar World magazine by Andy Brower because Lukather kept his gear at Andy's studio rental and cartage service. And so he caught wind of this amp, and so that kind of catapulted things. And
Yeah.
in '88, I just hit the ground running, and boy, it was amazing. Things just started happening so fast. I mean,
There's rumor that when you were first down there that you were doing modifications
Mhm.
to 100-watt Marshall.
yes, yes, indeed. And I still do those to this day, but back then we were doing a lot of them. Marshall power section is basically a 1956 Tweed basement.
Basement, yeah.
And the Tweed basement is basically a Western Electric circuit from
Yes.
back in the, dawn of time, and it sounds really amazing. Well, the Marshall, because it had that power section, all it needed to sound like a Soldano was just change the preamp, right?
There you go.
And so it was an easy amp to modify. I was just like, this is pretty easy. I'll change this, add a little circuit board, punch in a hole, put an extra tube in it. Boom, you've got basically a Soldano in Marshall's
and
clothes.
And you paid your rent. Did you mark those amps in any way that?
No, because a lot of the guys wanted them to be sleepers.
Oh yes.
So from the front, I never added any extra knobs. It was always the same knobs on the front. Well, I've had amps come up on eBay that people claim are my prototypes. Some guy had taken a PV 5150 combo. You could just tell by instantly looking at it. It's a PV amp. They had stuck a Soldano logo on it. They had taken
that makes it.
Yeah, I guess so, right? They had taken some kind of marking pen to make it look like somebody had handwritten over the controls and stuff like that.
It's a huge compliment.
I guess that is a compliment, but I find it creepy and icky. So
Stalkers.
So then the guy says, no, this is back when he was modifying PVs.
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
In the early days.
yeah. This is way before. Yeah. I don't have as much time as I used to do those, but
That's
I get
you're a
them.
race driver now.
That's right. Go karts.
Hey, speaking of which,
Cycle
you're
cars.
a race car driver, and you were actually driving recently in the Tieton Grand Prix.
Okay, so let's qualify race car driver. Okay, so if a race car could be a little 6.5 horsepower go kart with motorcycle wheels,
That's it.
then I'm a race car driver.
All right.
They're in Tieton, Washington, which is a small town near Yakima. Every year they have the Tieton Grand Prix, and it's a race of these really cool little cars called cycle carts that me and a bunch of other knuckleheads build. It has to have this little 6.5 horse Honda pressure washer engine for power. My car is patterned after a 1922 Fiat Grand Prix car. Completed this year's race, and I placed 6th in what they call the Gordon Bennett Cup, which is 5 laps, and it's just a ton of fun. So yes, that's my race car driver status.
So you're living a charmed life.
I do have
So
a
you
charm.
build amps, you're a race car driver,
That's
and
right.
a fabricator.
Yeah.
And the panels that you hand people, they're just Beautiful. They're
Oh,
perfect.
thank you. Thank
Beautiful.
you.
Now, what about the guitar and the bands?
Now, my next goal, of course, was to be a major rock star. Which
Piece of cake.
Piece of cake, right?
Well, that's
Yeah,
easy.
the hard part's done now. Yeah, right. So, as history has proven, I never had the chops for that. So I moved back to Seattle in '94. I really wanted to get back into. I wanted to play more because the business was sort of established, and I wanted to have some time to enjoy myself. So I got in this band with this guy named Flaviano Giorgini, great guy, and we had a band called the Simians, and it was Flav is like an amazing songwriter. Amazing. He can write pop songs all day. And we played around Seattle for a while, had a good time. And then Flav finished his doctorate. He's got a PhD in genetics at the University of Washington, got married to a wonderful woman, and they moved to England. And he's now a professor in England at the university over there. Met my friend Helen Halloran. Well, she already had a band called Los Peligrosos, and for many years I played with Los Peligrosos. And when Los Peligrosos finally kind of fizzled out, she and I started a band called the Industry People. And we did that up until, like, say, a couple years ago, and then playing a little bit, but at the same time, I'm also really super busy.
Oh,
So
you're a race car driver.
yeah, I know. I don't have time for this. Yeah, Monaco next week. It's like that'd be fun.
What about your hydroplane experience?
Hydroplanes. Okay, Dad and I started building a little 9.5-foot runabout, and I built a souped-up Mercury outboard motor. Took it out, ran it on the lake a few times, and then since I was so into cars, the minute I had a driver's license, the boat thing was completely. I built a boat prior to that in like 7th grade with my dad, a little skiff. I spectacularly flipped it right in front of somebody's dock out in Lake Washington.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, no, I didn't really get hurt, but I got extremely emotionally shook up by it just because it's like, oh shit, this happened to me,
God, you're lucky.
I could have been hurt badly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was just really fortunate the way the boat went over and the fact that I kind of got thrown free and that I was wearing a life jacket and all the good stuff, but it was still very jarring.
Well, over there, and I think it's Ballard,
Yes, in Ballard.
in Ballard, Washington, you have a shop, a 3-tiered building, right?
Yes, I do.
And it's kind of, I've heard about it from not just you, but from other people that have been there. It's
You
pretty.
must come.
I want to.
Yes.
I have to.
Everybody comes.
I would like to be invited.
You're now officially invited.
I've got it on. Now
got
I am.
Got it documented. Nothing else.
You're
By
invited.
God, we
You're
got that.
invited.
Yeah.
You're all invited.
That's. Well, tell us about that.
Okay, so when I moved back from Los Angeles, my little 700 square foot business had grown. Well, while I was in LA, it had grown from 780 square feet to about a 2,700 square foot space in an industrial park in Van Nuys. And when I was heading for Seattle in '94, I needed some space, and so I had a realtor up here find me a location. Moved back to Seattle, and so I put everything in a shop that was in Ballard, right next to the north end of the Ballard Bridge, where I was for about 10 years. Well, my landlord kept increasing the rent every year, which it was agreed upon that he had the right to do that. But I started looking at the numbers and realized that what I was paying in rent on the building could be a mortgage payment on a shop.
Yep.
So my dad, being the brilliant architect that he was, he and I sat down and we designed a building. And, well, first of all, I found a piece of property in Inner Bay. So I'm now just on the south end of the Ballard Bridge, right across the street from Fisherman's Terminal. And I found a vacant lot over there, and which I had to pry from the gripping fingers of a friend of mine, but I made him an offer he couldn't refuse, and I scored a really beautiful piece of property. And we built, my dad designed it, and I built a building on this piece of property, which is pretty much the most perfect shop a guy can have. I have the first floor is my car hobby. I have a machine shop. I have my cars. I have just a blissful hobby shop. The second floor is where I do Soldano custom amplification. I have my business there. We have a full assembly situation. Everything's there on the second floor. And then on the top of it, I have an 800 square foot caretaker's quarters where I live, because you're not allowed to have residential living space in industrial zone property.
And you don't.
And I don't. I have a caretaker's quarter. I am the caretaker. And so, yeah, it's really nice. And like I said, I'd really love to have you guys come over and take a visit and take the tour and see all the toys. It's a toy store, basically.
Can we bring the camera?
You certainly can bring the camera. You
Cool.
most certainly can bring the camera.
All right.
Yes, yes. In fact, I encourage it.
Why don't we just, when we're done here today, let's get the calendars together and
Okay.
make that plan.
Certainly. Yeah.
I have another thing to ask you
Sure.
about. The Cream reunion.
Oh, that was awesome.
That's
This was fun. Okay, this was really something. Okay, for those of you who don't know, Eric Clapton's a huge hero of mine. I think he's one of the greatest guitar players ever.
Yep.
One of the things I never got to do when they were together was see Cream. I was too young, my parents wouldn't let me to concerts, and I'll bet you did.
I
Lucky
did.
you.
Eagles Auditorium.
The
was-
Eagles. That must have been awesome.
It was wonderful.
I'll bet it was, man. That must have been really cool.
It was
So
swell.
that's really, really awesome. Well, whoa. I am not worthy to sit
That's
next to
right.
you. You saw Cream.
That's right.
Yeah. So I never got to see Cream, and I thought, of course, that I never would, obviously. Well, strange how things work. So, of course, Clapton's using my amps. So, sitting in my shop, I get a phone call from Lee Dixon. Lee Dixon is Eric Clapton's guitar tech. And he's like, "Hey, Mike," he says, "I hate to call you on such short notice, but," he said, "we're going to be in town tonight." I was getting inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And they're providing backline, but Eric was wondering if you'd have an amp that we could borrow so that, he could play through, something he likes playing through, right? And I'm like, of course I do.
Probably not.
Yeah, sorry, I can't help you, Lee. You should have called. You should have given me a little more advance
Eric
notice.
who?
Yeah, Eric who? What's this? So yeah.
Yeah, here. What do you want?
yeah, you'll need a deposit. So anyway, we had just finished doing the NAMM show. So that year, we lined the back wall of the booth with a checkerboard of 4x12 speaker cabinets with amp heads on top of them all. The only cabinets I still had kicking around the shop that were available to be used for anything were these bright, shiny silver cabinets. So I'm like, okay, Lee, I'm going to bring some gear over. And so,
You ready?
yeah, so they were rehearsing at a place called the Power Station in North Hollywood. I brought Eric everything, not just a head, but I brought him 2 412 cabinets. So I wheel in the chrome cabinets, and of course everybody's kind of like looking at him like, what the hell are those? So so Lee rolls him up on stage, and I'm like kind of standing there. I'm like, Lee, do you think there's a chance I could just stick around for a few minutes? This was like one of those super lockdown deals, like super high security, very important, very important. And he's like, okay, he says, tell you what, just hide out over in my little tech booth, my little tech station over here, and we'll see how long you can stay before somebody, escorts you out, right? So while I was there, Robbie Krieger walks in, because I guess he or the Doors or somebody were going to be inducted that year as well.
And should be.
And so I didn't really get to meet him, but I saw him, milling about. I actually met Tom Dowd for like half of a second.
Goodness.
Yeah, it's like, Lee just like, hey, Mike, you know Tom Dowd? And I go, I don't know, but of course I know who he is. And so he shook my hand, smiled, and I was like, oh, love the records you've done,
No kidding.
And so then I kind of go hide back in my little corner again, and pretty soon Eric walks in and Ginger walks in.
Did it get real quiet?
It got pretty quiet with me.
Pretty Hollywood.
It was, people were kind of all of a sudden all eyes on the arriving people,
okay.
And then Jack Bruce walked in, and they had a moment of hugging, and I don't think they'd actually seen each other in probably years, the way it looked. And then pretty soon they walked up and picked up instruments and kind of, looked at each other, and they broke into, I think the first song they did was White Room. And so they went through a couple songs, and and it sounded absolutely amazing. And and at some point Eric came over and said hi to me and thanked me for the use of the amps. And he's a really humble guy. He's very cool.
I read his autobiography, and I gotta believe that.
Yeah, he's really a chill dude. And so it was just magic. I was like, I finally got to see Cream, you know?
Eric had been using your amps prior to that time?
Yes, yeah.
Pat, you saw Cream at the Eagles Auditorium, right?
In Seattle.
At what point of the show did Eric come over and walk over to you and greet you? And
he did. He asked me about my chrome amps that I
And by the way, all these big name artists that play my stuff all bought the stuff. I never gave anything away like the big companies
and that's
sometimes
a compliment.
do. It's a huge compliment
It means
because
they really want.
Yeah, that's right. Because a lot of these guys
it wasn't just
something
product
free.
placement.
It was actually like they wanted the stuff. Because a lot of companies will actually court artists and like, hey, how much stuff do we need to give you, and how much cash would you like to play our stuff? I mean, seriously, that's what used to happen in those days. Sure. Our deal was I wanted a Eric Clapton model Stratocaster, and I wanted him to sign it. So I have this.
Not too much to ask.
Not too much to ask. So I have a signed, one of those ones they were making in the 80s or 90s, whenever it was that Fender made those amps. I've got a signed Clapton Strat. So when I was leaving, so that's when Lee was kind of like, okay, I think you got to go now. And so, I took off. I was happy with that. And of course, there's no way I was going to get to even sneak into the event that night in Century City because it was a black tie, totally top tier Hollywood affair. And there's a picture of the event that night of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, and it's this black and white picture, and you can't help but see these bright, shiny amps right behind Eric Clapton. And those two speaker cabinets still sit in my shop, as a matter of fact.
Oh, that's cool.
I've since sold the head. Well, I had since sold the head to Lou Reed, although I still have the chrome cabinet the head was in.
If somebody in Seattle wants to buy a Soldano amplifier from a retailer, where would they go?
There are no retailers in Seattle, which is very unfortunate. Probably I would send them to, I'd probably send them down to Jay at Emerald City Guitars. Jay Boone, and have him call me up.
Yeah.
Helicopter up there.
Yeah, come and pick you up.
Early, yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen,
That
viewers,
was a lot of fun.
people out there in YouTube land, again, Mike Soldano, Pat Tennis, and me, I'm Barry Kennelly, and we're so pleased to have Mike on our show today. We hope to have him back to continue those wonderful stories and soon.
I would love to do that.
Somebody
Yeah,
look
just,
at me
yeah,
and say,
we're not,
"Shut up,
we don't need to.
Oh, I like this guitar.
A lot of people
This thing's already got the Soldano touch on it.
How's that for balance?
Should we bring everything up a little bit, or?